Hello and welcome to this MGTV special, Community Questions City Budget. My name is Ron Beacom. On Monday, April 11th, the City Manager presented to Midland City Council his proposed budget for the fiscal year 2016-17, which starts July 1. In this program, we'll dig into the numbers, find out what the challenges the city is facing, what this means to your city tax bill, and we'll find out how you can give City Council your input. My guests to begin are the City Manager, John Lynch, Assistant City Manager, Dave Keenan, who oversees the city's fiscal services, and the City Engineer, Brian McManus. So welcome to all of you. Dave, let's get straight to the numbers.
Sure.
Is the city's millage rate going up or down?
It is staying the same, happy to say. The current year is 15 mills, and the proposed budget also includes 15 mills.
So does this mean that property owners won't see an increase in their tax bill in the city?
I can't say that. If you recall, the tax bill you pay really has two factors. The millage rate's only one. The other would be the value of the property. So if your home didn't increase in valuation, then that would be true. I would warn you, though, that the state of Michigan uses a CPI to apply against residents to increase their value from one year to the next. So even though this year was probably the second lowest CPI since they've been tracking at 0.3%, the values will probably go up just a little bit. So, everything else staying the same, your taxes will go up just slightly.
So let's give people some context. What's the average value of a home in Midland, and what does that homeowner pay in their city taxes each month?
The average value, and that would be like market value, is around $143,000. So if you take that and you divide it in half, multiply by the millage rate, you're going to get an annual tax burden of around $1,073. If you break that down to a monthly basis, you're at about $89 a month.
And that's just purely the city portion.
Only city portion, correct.
And a reminder to our viewers that they write a check to the City of Midland, but a lot of that money goes other places. Where does that money go?
The city probably keeps about a third, actually. We collect money for school districts, including Midland Public Schools, Bay City Public Schools, and Black Creek. We also collect money for Midland and Bay County, Delta College, the ISDs for both Bay and Midland County, and of course the state of Michigan.
And then the county has some millages in there for 911, mosquito,
right. Yep.
All those types of things.
That's correct.
All right, let's take a look at the chart and dig into the numbers in terms of the 15 mills. So walk us through that.
Well, so if you're familiar or if you're not, the city's millage rate, we really have a handful of components. We break it down for general operations. There's a portion that's for stormwater. There's one mill that goes for the library. We have a portion of the millage goes to pay for the pension that goes to fund the police and fire folks. And then we have a portion that's for debt service, and that relates to special voter approved debt. So if you look at where we are this year, the total adds up to 15 mills. The general operation of that is 12.36. That's actually going to go down to 12.32. The portion that we use to fund stormwater management, and that's the, when you see the grates on the side of the street where all the rainwater goes into, that's part of that network. That's at 0.33 mils currently. That will be reduced to 0.3 mils. The library will stay the same at 1 mil. Public safety pension is increasing from 1.05 to 1.12, primarily because pension costs are increasing. And then the portion that we have to service the debt, that was special voter approved debt, stays the same at 0.26. Again, 15 mils this year, 15 mils next year.
And the voter approved debt on the sanitary sewer improvement, that goes back?
In 2001, if you remember, when we tore up Saginaw Road, was one of the things we did, and we added pump stations throughout the city. Yeah, we borrowed about $14 million at that point. And so that had to be voted on, and because it was, we're allowed to levy the debt outside of our regular millage rate to service that debt.
And then let's look at library options and public safety pension. What does statutory mean in there?
Well, we're allowed to, outside of our city charter restricted maximum millage, the law allows us to take out and use 1 mil for library operations. So that money comes in and goes directly into the library. Now, for all intents and purposes, we treat it as if we have that 18 mil limit for everything at this point. And the same is true for, they're actually Act 345 pension plans, which is what services police and fire. If council wishes, they can allow us to float that separately outside of our regular operating millage. And they've done that for the last several years now. So every year we figure out what our obligation is going to be to pay into that pension plan. We convert it into a millage rate, and that's what gets reported.
And again, bottom line, the millage rate overall is flat at
correct.
15.
Yep.
So now I turn to you, John, the city manager. How are you able to keep the millage rate flat? What factors contributed to that?
Well, I'd say the primary factor is the leadership team itself that keeps a very sharp pencil and pays very close attention to annual expenses and costs. There are, I'd say, three fundamental layers that contribute to our outcome here. The first one is that we're able to carry over unspent dollars that are budgeted in the current fiscal year that we anticipate will not be spent, and they can make a revenue side contribution to the upcoming fiscal year. So that's where the leadership team plays a really important role in making sure that we only use the resources that are absolutely necessary to be used. So we had a good year in that regard. The second layer has to do with our ongoing costs, and in the current year we had good experiences with things like our overtime expenses and our energy costs, things like gas and oil, natural gas, electricity consumption. All of those things we have to pay money for just like every other household, and when the bills go down a bit we realize some savings, and that's been helpful to us. And then on the last layer, we generally approach the construction of the budget each year with a very conservative perspective, and this year we were fortunate in that the revenues actually came in a bit stronger than what we had anticipated. So when you take those three things together, we're in a pretty good position, and we're able to sustain the level of service that we offer today while charging the taxpayer the same rate that we levy today.
So again, to recap, the savings in the current year's budget you can apply to the next year's budget.
Correct.
And level of services again for our viewers?
Yeah, will remain unchanged, and we don't anticipate any reductions. I'm anticipating that in the coming weeks the City Council will take up a question about dial-a-ride service, and we've been contemplating whether or not to expand dial-a-ride service to include Sundays. We used to have a Sunday service, and when we went through the budget challenges of 2007, 2008, that was something we had to eliminate, and the community will have an opportunity to offer their sentiments on that in late April and early May.
Okay. A major focus the current year, next year's budget is making infrastructure improvements. So Brian McManus, our city engineer, how much money does the city have budgeted to make improvements next year on our streets?
Well, we have a large program, Ron. We're putting a program forward with $5.5 million into the major and the local neighborhood streets. And then on top of that, we also are putting about $2 million into water main reconstruction below those streets as we go through.
So where does this money come from?
We have two primary sources that are forward in this program. One, the biggest one, is our county road millages. We currently have two 1 mil levies out there that generate about $4.6 million total. The second source of funding is the gas and weight tax. When you fill up your car at the gas station, you pay some tax at the pump, and that comes back through to the city as a revenue. Those are the two primary sources.
So that's a state collected tax that some of that comes
Correct.
back. And then to go to the county millage for a second, so it's charged county-wide, but then there's a formula to allocate the money between the city and the townships and the county?
That's correct, and that formula is actually based on SEV, and the city of Midland is about 2/3 of the SEV of the whole county. So the city would get about 2/3 of that revenue generated by a mill.
Well, we're recording this in mid-April. It's orange cone season is getting started. What are going to be some of the visible projects over the coming year?
Well, we have some large ones. We have St. Andrews is in this upcoming program between Washington and Sugnet. We have a project on Wackerly between Shade and Sturgeon. We also have a project in there to do some maintenance work on Eastman Avenue, essentially from Airport Road to the north up into the Feeney Chrysler area. And along with that project, we're also looking at making an incremental improvement in the traffic flow. As everyone knows, there's serious traffic issues there. We want to put a right turn lane in southbound at Airport Road. It'll be right next to the Bennigan's restaurant. An incremental improvement, but it's something that moves us forward a little bit with the traffic concern.
Is the Sugnet Road extension part of all this?
No, the Sugnet Road extension from Dublin to Northwood is in the current budget. That's currently underway, that project.
And that project is going now?
Yeah, it's going, but it's not part of the upcoming budget. It's already budgeted, so.
Now let's break down what you actually do in some of the streets. I know there are 3 different approaches to what's going on out there.
Yes, we do have 3 approaches. We have a what we call a surface treatment type approach. That's the little pebbles you might see on the street with some asphalt put on top of it. We have a mill and fill approach that is a little bit higher level, and then we also have a reconstruction level. And during the last road millage discussions that we had with the public, we indicated to the public that we would be doing the heavier type reconstruction projects with this second 1 mil levy that we had, and so this program makes that happen.
Well, and when you talk about restructuring a street, in some of those situations, we're not talking just the road service, you also do utility work underneath?
That's correct. The least expensive level would be your surface treatment, the pebbles I talked about. Larger program gets you below the asphalt, down into the underground work that's needed to be done. And as I mentioned earlier, $2 million worth of water main work is also being done below those streets at the same time.
So the thinking is, while you got the street blown up, take care of stuff underneath.
Do it in one time and less interruption to the public.
Any advice for motorists when they drive in and around these projects? I know it's an ongoing concern.
Yes, and safety is always a top concern. We work closely with the police department on that, on every construction project. The public will see a lot of orange barrels around this year in different traffic zones, visible signage that directs them where to go and how fast to drive. And so we do ask the people to be patient. Patience and cautious driving essentially protects the workers and the motoring public and people that might be around a construction site.
Well, I can speak from the experience that sometimes for MCTV, for videos we do for the city, we throw on an orange vest and we're out shooting these crews working, and sometimes it's about a safety video. And I know within the city, mainly people are going by 25, 30 miles an hour. That's fast enough when you're standing there. I can't imagine people work out on freeways, the safety concern they must have.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, and like I said, we monitor it closely. Our police department, from time to time, will issue tickets. We do watch that, and like I said earlier, cautious driving benefits everybody.
Okay, John, let's go big picture again with you. Why are these types of infrastructure improvements important to a community?
Well, at the end of the day, everything that we do here is related to ensuring the current livability and long-term sustainability of the city of Midland. And so if you want to be a community that people will choose to live in and choose to invest in, you have to offer a high-quality opportunity for the living environment. And solid infrastructure is part of that. We have to have the capacity to produce clean water, to treat dirty water, to take the rainwater off of the streets, to travel on streets that are in hopefully decent condition, to have parks that people can enjoy, to have a library that people can really appreciate and utilize in new and expanding ways all the time. And there are many other services, obviously, that we offer here. And you stitch all of those together, and they produce this fabric, if you will, of a quality of life opportunity that most communities of our size simply cannot offer. So we have to take good care of what we have.
Okay. And Brian, you mentioned the county road millage. I know there's road millage question on the ballot this November. Tell me about that.
Yes, the long-standing road millage that's been renewed on a 4-year cycle for approximately 40 years is up again this year. It will remain a 1 mil question, which would bring $3.6 million of revenue to the county. About $2.3 million of that would be the city's share, as we mentioned those numbers earlier. So Midland voters, you know, they've always been thoughtful and considerate when it comes to this millage, and of course, again, they'll be given the opportunity to choose the path forward again in terms of the road millage in this November.
And then again, that's in November with the presidential election. Well, Brian, I'll let you get back out to the streets. I know you're more comfortable in Orange Fest out there. Up next, we'll be joined by Midland's mayor, and we'll find out what other factors are impacting the city's budget.
To review the city manager's proposed budget for the 2016-17 fiscal year, go to the Grace A. Dow Memorial Library's Government Information Corner, the city clerk's office in City Hall, or online through the city's website at www.cityofmidlandmi.gov. To comment, you're welcome to attend one of the public hearings. Call the citizen comment line at 837-3400, or send an email to cityhall@midland-mi.org, or mail your comments to 333 West Ellsworth Street, Midland, Michigan, 48640.
If you've just joined us, you're watching Community Question City Budget here on MGTV, Midland Government Television. We're now joined by the mayor of the city of Midland, Maureen Donker. Welcome, Mayor Donker.
Thank you.
She represents Ward 2 and was elected by her fellow council members to serve as the mayor, now in her 7th year leading our city. So what's your initial reaction to the proposed budget?
I think I can speak on behalf of all of council that we were very pleased when we saw the budget. You know, they in January, when we meet as a group, we talk about some directives that we have for staff, and certainly the goals that we have as a city are what drive us in our decision making. And those goals are, quality of life, effective utilization of resources, and economic sustainability. So when we met, we talked about the things that we wanted to see. And one of the things was, of course, we want services to remain at the highest level possible, and with particular emphasis on public safety. That we would consider a budget increase. We would like it to be not more than $0.25 mil, but we would, think about up to $0.5 mil. That we wanted our unreserved fund balance to remain the same, $5.1 million, and we hoped that we could add to that, and which they did. We're adding to that by $500,000, and that we wanted to hear about dial-a-ride services, the costs of dial-a-ride services when they present the budget, what those additional costs would be for Sunday services.
Let's step back to your State of the City speech that you give annually in early March to a group this year out at Valley Plaza. And you met head-on some of the issues that a lot of people are talking out around town, with Dow taking over 100% of Dow Corning, Dow, DuPont. What have been your thoughts? What did you share with the audience that day?
Well, we talked about that that by itself, what that merger and acquisition was going to look like, and how that could impact us. And I said that we have choices when it comes to that. We could face it with fear and trepidation, or we could, face it with new energy, with an opportunity to, address challenges that might be hard for us, but that would make us better in the long run. I believe that we are a community of, people who have great ideas. We all want Midland to be the city of choice. We know that we have to attract the best talent for businesses to remain viable. And I think many people, live in our community. They want to raise their families here, and there are people who want to grow old here. And we have to make sure that all of that happens.
And you have the perspective of somebody who was born here and grew up here. So you've seen a lot of change over the years.
I've been here a long time, yes.
I didn't say how many years, something like that. All right, let's talk about some of the issues impacting the budget, John and Dave. The thing that was big in the news 2 or 3 years ago was the elimination of the personal property tax. So Dave, where are we at in that process?
Well, we're actually in year 3, and the first 2 years kind of went relatively unnoticed because it there is probably about a 10% impact compared to what we would see this year. The third year is big because the big companies like the Dow Chemicals and General Motors, they get to participate this year, and they get to basically pull their personal property that's for manufacturing off tax rolls. And instead of paying 100% of that burden, they'll pay about 20 to 25% directly to the state. From our perspective, so far, it seems to be working out okay. Now, this is always subject to, is the state going to have enough money to make good on all this stuff? And the latest I've heard, it seems like they are. From the city's viewpoint, we had there was about just over $300 million worth of personal property that was eligible. Only about 260 that was actually applied for to be taken off the roll. However, as I'm sitting here today, there is a new bill out that is going to allow an extension for those folks who missed the first deadline to reapply. So there's a good chance that more of that will actually be taken off our roll. But if we get reimbursed for those funds, really all we're out is the difference in the millage rate. And I say that because if we could leave the money on our tax roll, we would get to collect our current 15 mills. The state's formula would reimburse us at our 2012 millage rate, which was less. So it's about maybe less than $100,000 lost revenue for a pretty big phase-in for the personal property so far. So financially, it's been okay. It's been more work, and it's still changing, but it's pretty close to what they said it was going to look like. So.
And for somebody new to the subject, John, I always appreciate your definition of personal property tax versus real property.
So real property essentially is the land and the building. And if you think about any structure, think about a manufacturing facility, if you could take that building up off of the ground, peel the roof back and turn it upside down and shake it out, all of that stuff that would fall out of the building is personal property. So the computers and the chairs and much of the manufacturing equipment, things of that nature. It's important to recognize that homeowners don't pay personal property tax. The possessions that you have inside your house are not accounted for the same way, but retailers and commercial enterprises, manufacturing and industrial enterprises do pay personal property tax.
So we'll go back to you, Dave. So again, what's happened over the past 2-3 years, and I know there was a ballot issue statewide that these businesses, industry, it's been phased out to pay a tax to the city of Midland on personal property tax. And I know it's statewide, but we'll just use city of Midland. Now they pay a different fee to the state of Michigan, and the state redistributes some of that money back to the city. And that difference hasn't been as severe as it was once projected to be.
Right. Yes, if for the city, they're making us relatively whole, which is a lot better than some of the other ideas that have been bandied around several years ago. So if you are a corporation, instead of paying 100% of the personal property to us, you will pay, it's actually, they're calling it an essential services fee that will be paid directly to the state. The state will use that, and they'll also utilize some expired tax credits from 2 years ago. The thought being corporations are using these tax credits to avoid, for lack of a better term, paying taxes. Credits are now gone, so they'll have to start paying those taxes as new cash flow to the state. They use those two sources, plus if they need some additional funding, they can take it from the sales tax up to 2 cents of the 6 cents. They could use a portion of that to then redistribute to all the local units, such as the city. So, like I said, so far it's early, but indications are it's going to be okay, at least in the near term.
Another issue facing the city, an ongoing thing in terms of costs, are unfunded liabilities.
Oh, yeah.
What's that mean?
Well, the city they have 3 plans. They have what's called defined benefit pension plans, where as opposed to like a 401k where the amount of that you have is defined when you put it in. For a defined benefit pension plan, the amount that you get out of there is actually based upon when you retire, what your income was, how many years you worked, all that kind of good stuff. It's actually a very complicated formula that we have to hire actuaries to figure out what our obligations would be. We have 2 pension plans, one for civilians and one for police and fire, which we talked about a little bit earlier. And then we have a plan for retiree health care, for retiree benefits. So if you add those 3 together and you look at what the actuarially determined value of benefits for all those plans to be paid out in the future is, and then you subtract how much money we actually have on hand to cover those benefits as of a particular point in time, we're about $120 million short in terms of funding. So that underfunding is what's called an unfunded liability.
So the goal is to...
The goal would to not have an unfunded liability. Now, the good news is we don't have to pay it all at once. We don't have to come up with $120 million. The city contributes every year to pay for these benefits. I think it's about $14 million, a lot of money, that's going to be in the 16-17 budget. Now, there's 2 components of that. There's about $3 million that would actually pay for new benefits that are going to be earned by the staff that are still in the plan. The other $11 million go to pay for benefits that have already been earned. So that $11 million is going to pay towards that $120 million unfunded liability.
And these costs are costs that are part of doing business as an employer.
That's correct.
Well, one of the things that you want to keep in mind in terms of an organization like ours is that we're a public service entity, and our core costs are related to people. 60% of our costs are people related. And when you discuss the liabilities associated with post-employment benefits, you're talking about the people who work here today and the people who previously worked here and don't work here today.
So those are factors there. The mayor mentioned earlier one of the directives was our increase our general fund balance or reserve. How much is that? Why do we need that? And why do we want to grow it?
Well, think of it as your savings account. In any household, you attempt to establish a healthy savings account to cushion the variables associated with day-to-day life and the occasional unforeseen circumstance that might otherwise upset your financial position. The same is true of our organization. And so having a healthy fund balance that is sitting in reserve puts us in a position that if we were to encounter an unforeseen circumstance, say for the sake of argument, heaven forbid we have some kind of catastrophic natural disaster. We would have to focus on recovery, and there would be a series of expenditures that would be necessary to engage in cleanup and reorganization and provision of services that people would expect. So you've got to have the resources in place to deal with those kinds of unanticipated costs should they arise. Throughout the last 5 years, we've done a pretty fair job of keeping our savings account healthy, but we really haven't been in a position to grow it because we've been trying to constrain the growth of the city budget overall. So in the last 2 years, we've focused on trying to find opportunities to add to that savings account, if you will, and that unreserved fund balance is moving upward in a good direction.
Water and sewer rates. I pay a property tax bill, but I also buy water and sewer services from the city of Midland.
Yes,
What's happening to that?
Well, the rates, they're going up a little bit, and that's pretty typical for both of those departments. Rather than flat line rates and then come in with a very large increase at some point in time, we've taken the approach that we look long term. We have 5 and 10 year plans, and we try to adjust the rates to keep us on track long range. And to do that, your water rate will go up 2% next year, and your sewer rate will go up 2.5%. And just for some comparison, the water rate has had a 2% increase in each of the last 2 years, and the sewer fund has had 3% rate increases in each of the past 2 years. So the water's the same, and the sewer is slightly less.
So why the need to go up a little?
Well, as I said, costs go up, and we try to put ourselves in a position where we can fund all of our infrastructure needs the best we can internally without having to borrow money. And again, looking long term, we may not have something that we're going to spend the money on today, But we may next year or the year after, and to put us in a position where we have adequate funding at that time, we increase rates incrementally to avoid, I guess, a shock to the citizens. And also we get the funding and we set it aside and reserve it, so in a year or 2 or 3 we have accumulated enough funding for that capital outlay.
Now, our water supply comes from Lake Huron. It's the Saginaw Midland Water
Saginaw Midland Municipal Water Supply Corporation.
Water Supply Corporation. Our pipes in the water in Lake Huron up near south of Tawas.
Whitestone Point.
Brilliant thing that was developed in the 1940s, if my memory is correct.
1940s, yeah.
And it's been City of Midland, City of Saginaw, but now Bay County has a role with this. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, Bay City has long been the provider of water to the retail customers throughout Bay City and Bay County. And being at the southern end of the bay with their raw water intake, they've been faced with a series of challenges associated with the quality of the water. You know, the wind direction is predominantly facing the location of their intake, and it creates some instability in terms of the kinds of things they have to do to treat the water. So it becomes rather expensive to account for the changes in treatment methodologies that are necessary. To make a long story short, the city of Bay City and the county of Bay got together along with some of their outlying customers and went in search of a higher quality raw water source. And the Saginaw Midland Water Supply Corporation was the first stop in that search because we've had a history of success with our system. So they approached the authority, inquired as to whether or not we would entertain them as a customer. Certainly we were interested in doing that. There is tremendous capacity available within the raw water system to bring them on as a customer, capacity for current demand as well as future demand. And ultimately they've been operating for almost a year now, and at some point in the future, having them on as a customer will help reduce costs for everyone, and certainly it makes a higher quality of raw water, therefore a lower cost to process water supply available to the customers of Bay City, Bay County.
Mayor, when you look at all the things we've just talked about between the personal property tax, unfunded liabilities, the fund balance, water, what's your perspective as the mayor, as a council member, and somebody who's lived here a long time to put all that together and keep track of it?
Well, I am always amazed at the team that we have at the city, because as you just said, there's all that to put together and keep track of it, and they do a fabulous job of it. I think being a member of council, that it's amazing. And as you said earlier, I've lived here a long time. I thought I really knew a lot about our community, and I've learned so much since I've been here. So when I look at things like this, and just thinking about water as an example, water is gold. And years ago, our city leaders, saw to it that they provided us with access to high quality water, so we can see the impact of those kind of decisions, what they had then and how they impact us now. So I think for us on council, it's always a challenge to us to do the very best job that we can and be thoughtful about the kind of decisions that we make.
Okay, when we come back, we'll find out how you can and why you should take part in the city's budget process.
Midland City Council will hold a workshop on Monday, April 18th at 6 o'clock p.m. to review the proposed budget for 2016-17. Public hearings on the proposed budget will be held at City Council meetings on Monday, April 25th and May 9th, starting at 7 o'clock p.m. At the May 23rd meeting, City Council is scheduled to adopt the budget. City Council meetings are held in council chambers at City Hall at 333 West Ellsworth Street. The meetings are shown live and replayed on MGTV 188 on Charter Communications and through Channel 99 on AT&T UVerse. They are also available online through the city's website at www.cityofmidlandmi.gov.
Welcome back to Community Questions City Budget. We're recording this program in mid-April. Council is scheduled to adopt the budget on May 23rd, and it'll go into effect July 1. So, Mayor, do you want to hear from Midland citizens about what they think about the budget?
We always want to hear from Midland citizens. I think that's one of the things that we do well, both as a staff and as council. We work very hard to, listen and to understand where citizens' interests lie. I think this year, because there's really no major change in the budget, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that we'll hear a lot from citizens. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean that we don't want them to be paying attention, because I think they will, and we hope that they'll be paying attention to that, because I think this budget shows, again, something that the team at the city does well. And they have worked very hard to deliver a budget with no increase. And that is something that gets harder and harder every year to find those kinds of savings. So I hope that they pay attention, that they see that, and they're proud of the work that their team is doing for them.
I'll get into details in terms of dates and times, but how can viewers take part?
Well, certainly they can come down to the budget workshop, which will be, next Monday, and we're going to walk through the budget itself. And then there'll be 2 public hearings, and of course they can call any of their councilmen and ask questions, or call and talk to staff about any questions that they might have.
Question for you is, this is what, your 9th year on council. There are a lot of expectations people have of the people they elect, whether it be local government, state, federal office. What's your expectation of the citizen? I
would like citizens to, one of the things I talked about in the state of the city is that it'd be nice if residents would become citizens, which means they would understand and pay attention and learn more about their city and engage. So I think engagement is something that's really very important. So to learn and to understand how decisions are made, and then get involved.
There's a gentleman in my field who he has a great line in terms of how society is working nowadays, that we have to stop being consumers and start being citizens.
Right.
And there's a difference.
There is. That is a difference. And it means that you try to understand the context and how those decisions are made. And the truth is, it's everyone's city. It's everyone's city. It's, if you live here, this is your city. And hopefully you'll want to get involved, and that you will want to have a positive impact on that.
Well, and to go to that, one of your initiatives has been neighborhoods.
Yes.
Where are things at with that effort?
Well, the clergy, that community has really taken the charge in that, which is really very nice. And it's about, becoming a better neighbor. We want Midland to be a welcoming community. And the best place to start is in your own backyard with your own neighbors. So you just think, what a great place it would be if all of us, was working to make Midland a better community.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Let's recap some dates. The budget workshop that the mayor referenced will be held on Monday, April 18th at 6 p.m. Budget hearings are scheduled at the regular city council meeting scheduled on Mondays, April 25th and May 9th. Budget adoption is slated for the May 23rd council meeting, and all those meetings begin at 7 p.m. in Midland City Hall on Ellsworth Street. So, Dave, I'll go to you first. Closing thoughts on the budget and the budget process.
I'm actually really happy with this year's budget. Every year, and I don't want to totally repeat what the mayor said, but it gets harder every year. I remember I was the guy in January saying, look, I need to find $2 million to make this thing work. And again, that's the biggest hole that we've had to find so far. And there's a couple of big things that we found that got us there. And so every year you keep looking to try to find those things that help you connect all the dots. And you just, like I said, it was a lot of work. The departments were really helpful. They got it. And everybody kind of came together, and we didn't blow the expectations by a mile, but we got there, and we got there without having to ask for more money. And for that, I'm pretty proud of the book that everybody was able to put together. It's a good budget.
John, we refer to this as the city manager's proposed budget. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's really quite a misnomer. The city manager doesn't make clean water, catch bad guys, put out fires, build, solid roads, things like that. So, it's my job to help incubate an environment where the team, first of all, can be effective, and we've got a great team, as the mayor alluded to. Also, a key role is to translate the council's expectations to action, and that's really what the budget does. It's an interface between where the legislative body of the community is setting its expectations and bringing those expectations to reality. So for the budget to really work, the city council has to be in a position very, very early on. We're talking about January now for budget that goes into effect July 1, to give us, the staff, pretty clear direction. And that in and of itself can be difficult. So the council has consistently done a good job of that in terms of pointing us in the right direction and being consistent in terms of establishing their expectations. And they can only do that if they're listening to their constituents and being present in the community. And so the council's done a good job of those things on the front end. The staff has done a great job of bringing this stuff together on the back end. And when you put all of that into the pot and mix it together, you get a solid budget.
Mayor, last word.
Last word. Well, a minute ago you talked about neighboring, and really I think as we go through this transition as a community, with our major employers, that I just encourage all of us to be the best kind of neighbors that we can be. Because really, for Midland to be a great community, it does take all of us.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate all three of you being on today. The Mayor, Maureen Donker, City Manager John Lynch, and Assistant City Manager Dave Keenan. And we'd also like to thank Brian McManus, City Engineer, who participated earlier in the program. Again, you've been watching Community Questions City Budget on Midland Government Television, MGTV. I'm Ron Beacom. Thanks for watching.